Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to go over asset management modeling and example models. Uh, I'm your host for today. My name is Arjun Patel. I'm the growth marketing manager here at UpKeep. And today we have our guest speaker, David Layzelle. He was a former quality manager and engineer at Rockwell Collins, UK, and has had plenty of other experiences before. So,
Hi.
hey David, how's it going? Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah, hi. Yes, certainly. As you said, I'm a former quality manager at Rockwell Collins UK. Rockwell Collins are a huge multinational defense company based in the States in Iowa. And in that role, I also had control of asset management and facilities and keeping a day-to-day eye on what was coming up, what needed to be dealt with, and making sure that the the company assets were in a usable condition and working as they were required to. So it
That's
was a pretty intensive role.
That's awesome. So, how many years have you had working as a quality manager or just as a project manager?
Well, I've always been an engineer. My degree is actually metallurgy, but I've always been an engineer, design engineer. Um, I went into engineering management, and from there, I found that a lot of problems faced within companies, within engineering programs, are actually quality problems. So it seems right to me to move into quality management because that's where I could deal with those problems. It's all very well, you know what problems you've got, you're trying to get them fixed, but they are fundamentally quality issues. So I decided that I would best serve different companies by working in quality management and dealing with the issues there.
That's really awesome. I'm glad that we have you on here to share some knowledge about asset
Thank-
management and modeling.
Thanks.
So, on for today's agenda, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over what asset management modeling is, and then dive into the three asset management modeling types, which is IAM model, bottoms up and top down models, and integrated dependencies EAM system model. And then at the end, we could save all our questions. Be sure to type your questions in there. We'll have them answered by the end of the webinar. But basically, yeah, let's get right into it. So, David, what is asset management modeling?
Right, asset management is pretty broadly, it refers to a system that monitors and maintains the parts of your company that you need to make it operate properly. And that can be a huge amount of things, or it can be actually really small, depending on the size of your company.
Mm-hmm.
It can be tangible assets such as buildings, it can be machinery, it can be the actual physical day-to-day stuff that you need to run your company, or it can be less tangible assets such as intellectual property, financial assets, things like that. They're all encompassed as things that you need to have in place for your company to work properly, and you need to manage them in the right way to make sure that everything flows through properly.
Ah, interesting. So I know you sent me this graph right here. Can you explain a little bit about what this means?
Right. Basically, asset management can be carried out on a number of different levels. It can be it can have very low impact on your company. It can have very high impact, depending on what your business does and how many assets you have. How many assets are actually important to the running of your company? You will have. You can create an asset management plan based on this kind of graph. At one end, we have a regressive system, which is has perhaps low reliability, but also fairly low running costs. Might be used for a company which is using a, a system where they simply fix things when they fail.
Hmm.
So they have a regressive system. But then, as you get more equipment that needs looking at, it becomes more expensive, becomes more important to the running of your company, then you start to have to look at other type maintenance system that will actually fit in with what you want. You may have to have planned maintenance, you may have to run a predictive maintenance system, or right at the top, you may have to have an enterprise asset management system.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what you actually need in your company and how complex your company is and how complex your facilities and assets are.
Yeah. So
So
if
this graph,
if
it starts at one end. Sorry.
oh, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
It starts at one end with a very, very simple asset management program,
Mm-hmm.
which is we call regressive,
Yeah.
which is don't fix it, just replace it if it goes wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and then works through a series of scenarios where you go right up to the enterprise asset management EAM system, where you optimize everything and you encompass the whole thing under one ethos. All of
Uh,
your asset management is driven through one system.
I see. So, like for example, like something like this, like if you had a printer that was like low cost and didn't have that high of a running cost, like it would be more of a aggressive model. Like say if it's just doing maintenance in just a regular office, the printer goes down and instead of um, like creating a complex system to fix it, you just replace that printer because it's broken. But then
Absolutely.
as
Not
you
worth
get
the price.
okay. So as you get up the fun this chart right here, you would probably need a
Mm-hmm.
more complicated system. Like let's say if you're a manufacturing plant and you have like a multi-million-dollar machine, you wouldn't want that going down because um, of the lack of preventative maintenance that you're doing, and you don't really have a system to do it. So you have to optimize the preventative and uh, predictive part of it.
Yes, absolutely. If you're running systems like that, to have something like that breakdown could seriously affect your production system, and you're losing money, you're losing confidence with your customers. You have to maintain it to the point where you know it's going to be working all of the time, or you know when parts are likely to fail, so that you can replace them during routine maintenance.
Mm. So, if you would have to give one sentence of what management modeling, what would it be?
Uh, Asset management modeling really is it's a system to understand how your assets fit into your company and how you need to deal with them.
Beautifully said. All right. Um, so, what are the three types of asset management modeling or models, per se?
Really, there are fundamentally three different types. One is called the Institute of Asset Management Model,
Mm-hmm.
IAM model. We then have really two models in one, but still fundamentally different, the top down and bottom up models.
Yeah.
And then we have an integrated dependencies enterprise asset management system,
Mm.
which brings in all sorts of different parts of your company.
Mm.
They're all slightly different, they all have their pros and cons, but these are the three fundamental models that people use.
Okay. So let's dive deep into the first one, the IAM
Right.
model.
The IAM model. Now, crucially, this model is based on ISO 55000,
Mm-hmm.
which is a standard which has been developed alongside similar standards such as ISO 9000, ISO 14001. They all do the same thing. And what it seeks to do is to bring everything under one system so that you have the entire organization deals with the assets in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
It comes in under what is known throughout quality systems as a plan, do, check, act system, where you're continuously looking at what you need to do, doing anything that needs doing, and going around the cycle. However, you have lots of different things feeding into this. We have customers, legislation, investment, and a commercial environment that feeds into the organization as a whole
Mm-hmm.
as being the fundamental parts that we need to consider as a business, and we need to consider within our asset management program. And
Yeah.
that feeds down into a system where we bring in things like risk
Mm-hmm.
and strategy and planning.
Yeah.
So it's quite a rigid model. It asks you to continually do the same thing. As I say, you have this cyclic life cycle delivery where you are looking at what you have, looking at what might happen,
Mm-hmm.
fixing anything, but then you're also looking at the other blocks that come in, and it deals with things in quite a rigid way. It's not perhaps a model that you might want to run in a smaller, lower cost business. It's quite an intense one to run.
I see. So what would you recommend? Like, what companies would you recommend using the IAM model?
Because it's bringing all sorts of aspects in, such as legislation. It is intended really for a well-established, large, even global business, which has a lot of assets and has to deal with all different aspects of those assets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this needs quite a lot of personnel to help run it because it has so many things that it encompasses.
Ah, I see. So, uh,
Because
like, just having customers, legislation, investors, commercial, like so many people involved in the whole entire process makes it more of like a complicated, heavy flow for
it
that might not
it
be
does.
applicable to like smaller businesses.
No, it wouldn't. It's a very formal process,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's an ISO standard, it has to be audited. Auditors will check that you are doing everything you say you will do, as you do with ISO 9000, 14001.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite onerous to run. However, if you are in a larger organization with a lot of assets, then this becomes quite streamlined.
Mm.
Once you have the structure in place, then it's fairly easy to run because you know what you've got to be doing all of the time.
Yeah. So can you run through the graph and like describing like exactly how a system like this would play out?
Right. The main part of the graph, the part which is in effect on the ground, is the life cycle delivery,
Right here.
where within the company we're looking to at each piece of equipment. Uh, we acquire it, we operate it, we maintain it. What do we do with it? Each piece of equipment has a life cycle,
Mm-hmm. I see.
and this and it helps run that through risk and review. You're looking at your risks time of if you don't do something, if you don't maintain it, do you have to dispose of it? Can it be refurbished? You have a series of asset knowledge, the background knowledge that you have on these pieces of equipment, which might be small, high technology pieces of equipment, or they might be much larger, complex pieces of CNC machinery or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that.
Yeah. Oh,
Anything equipment like that will have an amount of knowledge about it. You will build up knowledge about it, and through that knowledge, you're able to feed into the life cycle and make decisions on, do we actually get rid of this piece of equipment to buy a new piece of equipment in, or do we continue to run this piece of equipment?
I see. I see.
That
Okay.
also includes.
Sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Right. And feeding into that really is asset management. You have to have a strategy in place which needs to be signed off by senior management. If you are talking about big, expensive pieces of machinery,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a corporate decision whether you get rid of it or even if you upkeep it. It's something which has to be discussed because it's not a simple piece like a printer which you can go and buy in your local shop.
So it'd be more
So
of like
each piece,
on this stage of the.
yeah, certainly, each piece in effect has to have the circuit. On that graph, it becomes almost predictive. So you're dealing with a large amount of machinery with different parts feeding into it, which you need to understand. The facilities manager at this point will have people advising him on what needs to be done where, um, and decisions will be made throughout the corporation as to how they run this. But as I said, this is quite a strict um, type of model, which is difficult to deviate from.
I see. So like if a company wanted to be more agile, they'd probably pick another type of model. So, um,
Probably best.
cool. Okay. So yeah, let's dive into the next model, and then we'll see how this one differentiates from this
Mhm.
first IAM model. So
Yep,
the
certainly.
next one is bottoms up and top down models. So can you
Yep.
explain a little bit about what that means?
Right. Well, yes. This is in effect two different models which are driven in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with the we have a triangle. It's very much like in education there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
There's a similar thing which you have the base, the stage one, which becomes the most fundamental things that you need to do. And on top of that, you start to build up other aspects which perhaps are equally important, but are supported by the previous things.
Mm.
So in this case with the bottom up model, which is a system which starts with a foundation. You decide day-to-day maintenance work. This is driven really from a technical side. So you have stage one where you decide your maintenance program. Uh, you then on stage two gain control of the equipment decision. What condition? What do you actually have?
Yeah.
What uh, what type of equipment have you got? What sort of state is it in? Which is going to then dictate to some extent how the rest of your graph is built up.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've decided with uh, what your day-to-day maintenance work is going to be, you know what kind of equipment you have, you can then create this environment to make the best use of what you have. But you couldn't do that without having the two bottom pieces of information first. Once you've created that environment, you're able to potentially eliminate failure modes.
Mm-hmm.
You should, by that stage, understand what you have and be able to understand, yes, these are failure modes that are common to us. We can actually plan for those. And then finally, you can manage your equipment health in quite an easy way because you've understood everything that's below it. And that really describes what the bottom up model is. You start with understanding your system
Yeah.
and then going through until you get to your fifth stage where you simply run it.
I loved the analogy that you made. This triangle look like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
I think that makes it
Mhm.
a lot more understandable of like how you should approach this. Like you have to be able to get the basics, like gain day-to-day maintenance work. Um, like something like using a CMMS to just like take control of work orders and just focusing on work orders management. And then once you are able to do the day-to-day maintenance work and be able to tackle that really well, then you could start like seeing like what other opportunities you could do to control your like quality, such as like gain control of
Yes, that's
equipment
right.
condition is like then you have parts and inventory control, and then you could also monitor that after you've like mastered the work orders, and then so on and
That's
so forth.
absolutely. Absolutely, that's it. Yes, you have to build up from the bottom, and that is the indicative part of the bottom-up model. It's really the facilities manager is saying, this is what we have to do to
Hmm.
maintain all of this equipment. And that is in contrast really to the top-down model, which is driven by senior management. And they will dictate that we're actually going to maintain these pieces of equipment in this way.
That's really interesting. So I'm just assuming that this is probably a model that more smaller businesses would be attuned to, where it's taking it step by step instead of tackling the whole entire system with a lot of people involved. This is more of like, this is strictly for the maintenance team to first tackle on first to see how they could tackle work orders and then build
Yeah,
upon that process to eventually become a more flexible version of this.
that's absolutely right. Yes. Crucially, the bottom up model is driven by the facilities manager at the facilities department. They are dictating to the rest of the company, this is what we're going to do, this is what we need to do
Hmm.
to maintain it. Whereas the top down model becomes more of the maintenance department are driven along certain routes because management may deem that there are certain pieces of equipment which take precedence over other parts.
Yeah. So
So
the top down would juxtapose to the bottoms up, where it's like the the maintenance department is setting initiatives of what they want to accomplish with all quality, and then trickling it down. Whereas like bottoms up is just like starting with the facility manager trying to tackle this one problem.
absolutely, yes. And as you say, the bottom up model is a perfect kind of model for a smaller company, perhaps with less assets.
Hmm.
Whereas top down would be probably could also be aimed at a smaller company, but maybe with a bigger spread of assets, some of which are high value assets,
Yeah,
some of which are less value assets, and management might drive you down. You need to be looking at these assets, whereas these other ones we can deal with on a simple replacement regressive basis.
that's very interesting. I feel like anyone that would use upkeep would probably follow these two type of models.
Yes, they're very well used models. Yes.
Cool. So let's move on to the third model, integrated dependencies EAM system model. So what
Yeah.
does that mean?
Well, this is very much like the top down model. However, you have you're distinctly identifying certain parts which it's being driven through the company, and it's senior management who will make the decisions on things, while the facilities manager might be doing the footwork in a bottom up way to develop what's going to be done at what point,
Hmm.
what should be itemized, optimized, and everything. It's then the rest of the company also feeds into how these things are dealt with. It's it's much more broader than the simple top-down model.
I see. I see. Um, so so where would you start on in trying to inter like use this system or this
To use
model?
this system, again, um, this is really a system quite like the ISO 55000
So
requirement.
so sort of similar to this model.
Yeah, it is similar to that model, though it's more driven by corporate management rather than having all those interdependencies of legislation, customers, and things like that.
Mm,
So it's a kind of like the top down.
yeah.
It's also kind of like the original model, the Institute of Asset Management model.
So this would be like a hybrid of both systems where it's like a little bit more structured, but then still has the components of like having,
Bit more structure,
yeah.
yeah, but it doesn't have so many inputs from outside the company.
Hmm. I see.
So while you might still consider things like legislation and what you have there, what you need, it's more driven within the company and the needs for the company's equipment. This is something which you find quite a lot in high technology companies because they may have particular systems, laser systems, high technology machining systems,
Mm-hmm.
and even high technology facilities
Mm. So,
where they need to control them. Sorry.
no, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, it's aimed really to make sure that you bring all of your systems under one place, but it's still controlled within the company.
I see. So I know you worked at an aerospace company before. So would an aerospace company use a system like this type of model? Because they tend to be more high technology, or they would probably have to use the IAM model.
Yes, absolutely. It's always with things like aerospace, with things like defense. Yes, you're certainly looking for record keeping.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing to do with that is any ISO model, like your 9000, like your 14001, your OSAS 18001. If you've also got ISO 55000, which uses many of the same kind of policies and procedures,
Yeah.
you're integrating your whole lot, your quality system, your environmental system, your asset management system, all under one portfolio. And that make with a larger company, a large multinational, that makes sense. So this might be something for a smaller high technology company.
Mm.
Um, it's you see the problem with lots of these systems is decision making. If you're using the IAM model, then you're getting your decisions from the the corporate heads,
Yeah.
whereas this, while it says corporate management, it can still be done from local management because local management know what they've got, what they need to maintain.
Mm-hmm. What would be
Whereas
an
if you're using
example of local management? Would that just be like the maintenance department, or would it be
site management,
site
rather
manager?
than
Okay.
it could be site management, it could be even by country. If you've got a company which is multinational,
Mm-hmm.
corporate management could mean country management.
Mm.
So each country will maintain their own system under this EAM, but this still considers things like the performance you need to maintain, the risks you may come up against, what kind of investments you're going to be having. Because it is, if you've got high technology, you are looking at investments. You're looking at typically equipment and facilities, even which need maintaining, which have a substantial cost to them,
Yeah.
and need maintaining.
Cool. This has been extremely informative. I felt like I've learned a lot. So before we wrap up, I have time for uh, a few questions. Let's see. Let me go in and see who's asked which questions. All right. So I have a question from a facility manager. He says, in your experience as a quality manager, what have been the most difficult things to keep track of from your previous jobs, I'm assuming?
Right, for my previous jobs, the most difficult things to keep track of, um, I think it's been really audit findings and whether equipment discrepancies have been completed. It's easy to put in place something where you have a system of checking on the state of any work that you've done on equipment. You will always have something that needs doing.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, the larger your company gets, the more stuff needs doing. However, you need to then filter out what's the most important, what's going to be done. And it's really making sure that if you come up against a problem which has to be done, has it been done on time? Is that equipment now steady, ready to run? Is it producing a quality product? This is basically aimed at expensive pieces of equipment which might be turning out expensive products.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really rely on hoping it's been done. You need to know these things, and it has been difficult, I found in the past, to actually pin down in larger companies, particularly if they're over several sites,
Yeah.
if these things have been done. Unfortunately, some asset management modeling does need a bit of chasing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always the hardest bit to do.
I see. I see. So, would like a CMMS help that in terms of like keeping track of like the most like of all the quality?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. CMS run on multiple sites
Mm-hmm.
becomes the absolute holy grail. It's fantastic. CMMS systems, if you have your people maintaining it, then you have the information at your fingertips. If you're not running a CMMS system, then to a large extent, you're guessing or you're phoning people up to find out, has this been done? You don't want to be doing that. That's not the role of any quality or facilities manager.
Yeah,
They need to be looking at their software and knowing that's been done. And CMMS is the only way to do that.
that's awesome to hear. Uh, so we only have one time for one more question, and then we could wrap up this webinar. But if you do have questions that weren't answered in this webinar, feel free to email us at info@onupkeep.com or view our online chat on our website at onupkeep.com. So let's get to the last question. Do you feel the bottoms up model scales when you get to a large organization? So let's say if you started small and then you started getting larger and larger, do you think that bottoms up approach still
Yeah.
applies to larger organizations?
Right. Okay. If you've started an organization and you've got bottoms up model, you have all your assets on there, that's fine. As you start to grow, yes, it is possible to start boosting that up. All you're doing is you're making the bottom part of the triangle larger, and
Mm-hmm.
then subsequently the other parts become larger too. Now, we've already mentioned CMMS software,
Yeah.
and initially, bottom up model, you could run without it quite easily because you've only got a few assets, few bits of facility, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes fairly easy to run it. But as it becomes bigger, yes, you can scale it up, but you do need something like software to help you drive it.
I see.
It becomes more complex, and that complexity becomes difficult to handle unless you've got something backing you up. But no, it is perfectly feasible to scale that almost to any size you like.
That's great to hear. Hopefully that answers your question. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out at info@onupkeep.com or go on our website and just chat your question in the inbox, and we'll be sure to answer all your questions. Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure speaking to you about asset modeling, and we hope you the best in your endeavors. And I hope everyone else in this webinar has gotten enough information. And if you still have questions or you still want to know a little bit more about the subject, we're going to post a blog post with all of this information, and I'll be sure to email it out after this webinar. And also a copy of this webinar would be available on YouTube on UpKeep's YouTube channel, which I'll also include in the email after. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.